This video will cover posing characters for board layout using the sequencer and basic animation starter.
Okay, so now that we have our scene set up and we have some lights in place and we've talked a little about creating a camera in different locations, let's start to use this as a PreVis or storyboarding tool so that we can lay out our scene and kind of get a sense of where our characters might be and how they might interact. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to actually use a character that comes pre-packaged with the third-person template. And that's another reason I wanted to use a third-person template for this. So I'm going to double-click on this little in the All Contents. I'm going to go to Content, Third Person, and in here you're going to see it says Blueprints. And right off the bat, you'll see I have this character right here. And if I drag this character out and drop them, right now, that character will have a couple things attached to them. They're going to actually have a few things that are going to be attached to that blueprint. So if you don't want to use all that good stuff, what you can do is you can actually drag that out, drop it into your area, and then here you can see where it says skeletal mesh asset. What I can do is I can actually come over to the little icon here, this little folder icon in the details panel. Click on that, and then here, if I bring that out, you'll see that it now is just the skeletal mesh, just the actual mannequin themselves. It doesn't have all the stuff attached to it. So I can use that instead of using all those other elements. So I can use that. I can actually use the skeleton as well on that. It'll bring the skeletal mesh over with that. So the SK mannequin is the one I'm going to use. I also have this other one, which is just a different example of that. So there's the Quinn and the Manny are the two that I have in there. So and what I'm going to do with these is I can actually start to set these up, and if I wanted, I could just use them as is and say, okay, cool, let's set this up, get a camera shot in here that I like, and again, you know, if I'm digging what I have going on, I could start to look at, you know, doing an over the shoulder. And I'm going to turn my camera speed down a little bit because I turned that up a little. So I'm going to go down back to 1. And now I can come in here and start to set these guys up and block them in appropriate ways. Again, just kind of figuring out what I want to do with these. Boom. My characters here. Just kind of block them out the way I would like. Get my camera shot in there. And if I like that now, remember, I can just come in here and say, that's great. That's my first board. I like what I got going on. Let's go ahead and grab a high-res screenshot of that. And that's perfect. But the other thing I might consider doing to this is actually posing out the character a little bit. So right now, these are just in typical like A pose. They just kind of have their arms sort of off to the side. But the cool thing about using these particular mannequins is that I can actually add in a rig to these. And then when I have the rig, I can pose that rig. Now, I do want to mention there are tons and tons of rigs and characters available online that you can access. You can find some under the Fab Contents area, but there's also another site called Mixamo, or Mixamo, which is like a tool that you can access and download elements with pre-made animations on them, lots of pre-made characters to use in your particular process or your particular story that you're trying to tell. But for right now, we're just going to start by using these character assets. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to actually add what's called a level sequencer. So anything that I want to do with animation or any type of cinematic kind of thing going on in my scene, I'm going to want to add a level sequencer. And that's sort of how I would get in and kind of get a timeline to then animate or adjust my characters. So right here at the top, you'll see this little option that says display list here, and it's going to say add level sequence or add level sequence with shots. I'm just going to do a level sequence in this case to keep it simple. So I'm going to add a level sequence, and then it's going to ask me where I want to put that. I usually recommend come in here, make a new folder, and call this, something like sequences, and drop it in there. And I can name it also, so we'll call this posing assets. And there we go. So now I have my level sequence in place. And what I can do is I can simply drag and drop my character down into my level sequence. And now, instantly, you'll see what it does is it adds my character along with a rig and some transform options. So really fast now, I'm in here and I can start to just explore and animate, or not animate yet, I'm going to just pose my character. So what I could do with this is I could select, let's just say, the arm here, and we'll pose it sort of like this. Grab this one. Sort of like I'm just going to have him kind of go like he's saying, hey, what are you doing, you know? And I can come in and give all of these elements a little bit of a tweak, just so it doesn't feel so stock. So maybe a little shift on the hips. That looks nice. There we go. And now when I come back around, if I set my stage, you know, there we go. I got this going on. And again, I can always come in here and say, add all these different poses. And the cool thing about this is if I'm animating, or if I want to animate this, I can then come in and set keys down here in my sequencer, and then this character will animate. Now we're not going to get into that, because what we're really looking at doing here in this particular instance is just getting the character kind of posed out the way I would like it. I'm not really so concerned about the animation yet. Now to do the other character, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in here, I can close that down a little bit. I can select this character, go to my outliner, simply drag it over and drop it, and now this character too has the rig attached, and I can come in and I can do the same thing for this. So again, I'm using the same tool set. I'm using W for translate, E for rotation, and R for scale. I don't really want to scale these. I really just am going to work on rotation and translation. But you can kind of see now the power of this and how this really kind of works to our advantage. And you know, I can come in and really figure out like what I'm going to do to this posing to get it to function the way I want. And you know, whoop, whoop, whoop. There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with this. But again, for this particular process, the idea is that we just want to get to a point where we're able to pose our characters in a way that makes sense for the scene that we have. So that would be, you know, an example. There's my first shot. And maybe it's like more like this, right? So there's my first shot. So we have a little bit of an establishing shot. If I don't like the characters, you know, positioning, I can select them and just move them and put them where I would like them to be. So maybe it's a little bit more like this. They're having a conversation in the alleyway. Put my camera where it needs to go. Like this. And I'm getting that first shot right there. Cool, I like it. So again, hit G on the keyboard, get me into game mode, and I can really see what that's doing. Now, I had on here as well, you know, as we were talking about this, I can come in now and create that camera. So create Cinecamera Actor at that location. And then in Cinecamera Actor 1, go into my details. Now, one thing I do want to mention, you'll notice a couple new windows pop up when you're starting to work in the sequencer. But the idea here is that I'm not animating per se yet, right? I'm just posing my character. So for the most part, all I'm going to really need to do is access the character by clicking on them in my viewport here, and then I'll be able to kind of like manipulate these elements. I don't necessarily need to use the sequencer for animation at this point. It is just to get the space, the rigs attached. And now that they're there, I can go in, set my shot. If I wanted, the other thing I could do is, instead of putting, you know, using these characters and moving them and reposing them every time I want another shot, I could add in additional mannequins over time and then set different scenes and then use a different camera for that scene. So again, it's just going to be dependent on how you want this to work and what you want this to do. But as an example, there's Cinecamera Actor 1. I'm going to pop out a perspective view, and then now let's do that over the shoulder shot, like, you know, something like that. Actually, that looks kind of cool. And then maybe up a little bit. So that looks pretty decent. I'm using my arrow keys a little bit too, just to position. Hit G on the keyboard to get back to the game view. And now what we'll do is we'll pop in here and we'll do create camera, cinecamera actor, and now that's actor 3, right? And if I wanted to, I could come in here and rename these guys. So I'm going to say shot. I'm going to make sure it says camera, because I want to be able to type in camera if I need to find my cameras in the search. I'm going to say camera underscore shot 1 0 1, because I might get a lot of shots. And then on this one, this is camera underscore shot 02. And now I'll know I'm going to go camera shot 1, camera shot 2. And I can go on and on and on with that. And it's a really fast way to get in here and say, okay, cool, that's a great shot. I like what it's doing. Maybe I want to tweak it a little bit, you know, and say, oh, you know what, camera shot 2 actually should be more like this. Perfect. Really easy, right? I'm holding Alt, clicking with the left mouse and dragging around, and I can really start to get that idea. And again, I can animate all of this as well. So if I wanted to animate the camera, all I have to do is add the cameras that I want to this sequencer. And now I have this camera cut, and in here you'll notice I have a transform on the camera, and I'll do that just to demonstrate this. But let's say I want this camera to rotate or something. I'm going to go into my location, and I'm going to set a key on these guys just like that. And then I'll scroll down a little bit, let's say 60 frames. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the camera a little bit, and say we move like that. Cool. And you'll notice it's just doing that. Now that's great. And the other thing I can do in here is give that rotation. So we'll come in and, not the roll, I want the yaw. So we'll click on that and move that key back to the first frame. Then we'll come down to the end here and we'll go like this. And now what should happen is this. I should get a nice little camera move that looks something like that. Boom. So now I'm not going to get into all this because, again, it takes us a little bit of time to get familiar with this portion of it. But I could go even further with that. I could add all kinds of animation, add all kinds of things. But really, in this case, I like to add a little camera move just so I can previs and figure out, like, okay, what would the shot look like if my characters were standing here and then I moved and panned around to that. And then I can look and say, okay, would this be a good opening sequence? So here's my first shot. You know, it's a little bit of establishing, tells me where I'm at. Then I go into my second shot, and I really like what that's doing. And then maybe that's my third shot. So I just kind of get a sense of, like, you know, this is one shot, but it's like two boards. So I would have one board here, and this would be my second board, and I would show a camera move in my boarding. So again, let's go in and actually export these really quick. So I'm going to go to the first shot here. I'm going to pop into my option right here, scroll down, high-res screenshot. Go ahead and capture that. That has captured. Great. I'm going to go to my next shot. Boom. Perfect. Love it. High-res screenshot. That has captured. Boom. And then we'll scroll down here to that last shot. Capture. Boom. And maybe even for the good measure, I might go halfway through and capture another one just for the sake of it. And now when I open these up, you'll see that I have those shots. And you can see, here's my establishing shot. Here's my next shot. Here's my third shot, and then back. That one is the mid shot that I did not necessarily need. So if I'm boarding, now I can just show these to whoever is working on my projects and say, okay, I need a shot kind of like this, right? Now, it's really fast once you get the scene set up. The thing that's going to be kind of integral to our process here is that when you're, you know, again, if you know where you're going to be shooting or making your projects or whatever, maybe you're not even going to be out in the world. Maybe you're going to be using Unreal only and creating animations, then you don't even need to worry about it. But if you know, like, okay, cool, so this is the world that I'm living in, and here is the alleyway that I have designed. Guess what? You can lay it out in Unreal with as much or as little detail as you want. I did quite a bit of detail here. I downloaded a ton of stuff from Fab, but if your space doesn't require that, like if you just need to block it and say, I'm going to be in a restaurant for this particular project, and I have tables and a bar and doors that open here, and people are going to be here, you can just block that out with shape. As we talked about earlier at the very beginning of these demos, you can just block that out, and then you don't even have to worry about all the detail, because you're really just going to now look at blocking of camera, blocking of actor, and really getting into that process.